We see young people dressed in black having a culture, a subculture, as a role model for their behavior. We see if that is true, you have to be checked out. If this young man had Hitler as his role model, it's just all wrong. It's something, probably societies, which should be responsible to supply a decent role model for themselves, for their own sake, are they supplying such or not?
Well, having been involved in education over many, many years, it is interesting to note, and I'm sure you do the same here, the children learn to read. They have reading books with little stories in them. Well, you can get out, say in the English schooling system, the reading books from 1920, 1930, 1940, 1950, right up to 2005, right? And what you'll see is a change in the style of the heroes, right? So that in the 1800s, you will find, say in America, God and all the characters of the Bible are the heroes. You would find that here, after the Reformation had occurred, God and the famous people in the Bible are the role models. By the time you get to the 1920s, 1930s, if you're in the English system, of course, then all the famous military leaders of England are the heroes. But basically, they're still a Christian mentality hero, okay? By the time you get to the 1950s, it's John Wayne with his gun, right? But still,
guns again.
Still a God-fearing man
Yep.
who was lamenting the passing of heroes, real heroes.
Yes.
Because in his mind, you killed the bad guys, and you didn't do it the bad way, and you weren't in bed with the bad guy's wife so you could find out how to kill him. By the time you get to the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, the good guys and the bad guys are hard to tell the difference, because the good guys are doing the same thing as the bad guys, they're just authorized by the government, okay? And so by the time you get to the 2000s, the good guys are into everything the bad guys are into, right? And so it's just decided by the fact that, well, the majority want the good guy type to win. And so majority becomes the definition of what's right and what's wrong. And so it is true that in education, what's happened has been the change, the heroes, the role models in the minds of the children. So if you read some of the newer educational courses, strong-minded warrior women, right, are the role models. And so then we wonder why 10 years down the track the young girls and the young boys can't get married and make it last, because they're both heads of the house, they're both fighting for the strong, right? They both hold machine guns or rights to it in the army, and so there's no difference, and so that they can't make marriage work, and then they abandon it because they can't figure out what's wrong. So yes, what we've seen is a transition in role models, and again, it's largely due to where you believe you come from. I mean, the Greeks had it right when they said where we come from tells us who we are tells us where we're going to, and those are the three questions that govern most people's life. And if you get the answer to the first one wrong, if you think we've just evolved from the swamp, right, you get the answer to the second one wrong, because I'm just matter. And so you get the answer to the third one wrong. It doesn't matter if I take a .44 Magnum and blow Romulus Campan's head off. It would make good television. Okay?
At least for some people.
For some people, yes.
You just mentioned your involvement, your massive involvement in education, having lectures, messages, debates in the public school system. You just came here from Manchester, and you had some lectures and some debates in the UK. Could you give us a couple of details of that?
Yes, we actually got invited to do a debate against the leading theistic evolutionist of the United Kingdom, Dr. John Polkinghorne, who's been a professor of physics at Cambridge, and that was at Liverpool Cathedral, and the place was packed. It was intriguing to see. Of course, that's going to be made available on DVD, so you can see who won or lost for yourself, right? And we had several requests to speak to groups like the Geological Association at St Andrews University, and it is intriguing to note that I guess you could say a measure of the success which I believe God has given us is that 20 years ago we would not have been invited to these places, because anybody who believed in creation then, as Darwin was reaching his zenith, right, the followers of Darwin would have been regarded as a fringe nut. Well, over the past 20 years, now you get requests to speak to these places, right, and to debate this. So that is very encouraging to me. And so I'm hoping that in education we can progressively now see the pushing back of the strength of evolution and the re-establishment of the truth that creation is not just a blind belief, it's a fact of nature, it's a fact of reality.
We both know that all statements, all ideas that are rounded and well thought, they should have a key word or a short key statement. Why is a country's educational structure, or a part of it, inviting someone like you to do a debate? It's interesting.
Well, sometimes the reason varies around the different countries, so that I do a lot of work, say, in Canada, where there's been an awful lot of Islamics moved, right? So I get invited into the public education system there, not primarily because the teachers are interested in creation, but because they're scared stiff of the Islamics, who are totally anti-evolution. And I have to say, oh, that the Christians were strong in their beliefs that the teachers were afraid of the Christians too. But nevertheless, the result's the same. I can go in and talk about the evidence against evolution and for creation, so I'm pleased with the result. When you go to places like England, which of course is where Darwin came from and where evolution had its first and biggest impact, it is intriguing to be invited to speak to these places. And I guess you can say one reason for it is we've now gone through Darwin's theory of natural selection and found it didn't work. Okay, we're now 150 years after Darwin. We've gone through his version, we've gone through the neo-Darwinist school, natural selection plus mutation, and we've shot bacteria full of chemicals and x-rays, and we've managed to turn them into bacteria. So natural selection plus mutation actually doesn't work. We've now moved on to punctuated equilibrium. You know, the idea that once the creatures appear, they are inherently stable. But the minute you move to that, you're just admitting that nothing is evolving. And all of a sudden, if nothing is evolving, what are we studying this for, please, Professor? And so, therefore, it is very evident that something's wrong somewhere. Now, the evolutionist may not admit that he's got the whole picture wrong. He actually wants to keep the picture of evolution, but it's at least getting to the stage where students are saying, well, if you can't answer my questions, Professor, I'm going to invite Mr. Mackay of Creation Research in to talk to our Association of Geology, and you're welcome to come along. And that is happening more and more, which is great.
Great. Something is rotten in Denmark was a line of Shakespeare?
That is correct, yeah, Hamlet, I believe.
Let me ask you one thing. If an invitation goes somewhere, goes out of some sort of need, isn't it possible that the educational system just has a sense of a smell of something rotten in their own system, and they're just crying out that it looks great to have an invitational request to do that? Is there some sort of need in the background felt by those in charge with our educational systems?
Well, if you read your ancient Greek philosophy, one of their philosophers said, governments love reorganization because it gives the illusion of progress. All right? Now, if you look at education in the West, in the East, for the past 100 years, you've had new schemes, new syllabuses, new curriculums, right? And really, the reason they're coming up with these new curriculum, new scheme, is not that we've discovered anything new. It's just that they've lost confidence in the last version of it. So somebody gets a PhD and gets a government grant, and we do a new version, which in 10 years proves to be just as ridiculous.